My next guest delivered his second State of the County address last night, and protecting the community was a main theme. Erie County Executive Mark Poloncarz's plans include reforming child protective services and improving services for poor neighborhoods. He also, of course, talked about some old standards, infrastructure and jobs. Joining me now from Buffalo to discuss all of this is Erie County Executive Mark Poloncarz. It is good to see you, sir. Thanks for your time.
Good to be back.
So I find it fascinating that yes, you talked about child protective services, which of course is really necessary because of some unfortunate and tragic incidents that have occurred recently. But the overarching broad brush theme was sort of the war on poverty, which to me indicates that you are picking up on that same inequity issue that we've been hearing from President Obama, from New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio, and others.
Well, it's something I've been talking about for some time now, but I certainly wanted to emphasize it in my State of the County speech. As Erie County progresses, as our economy gets better, and it is getting better, we have to remember we don't want to leave behind the people on the lowest rungs of the economic ladder. Since 2012, January 2012, we've created 12,300 new jobs in Erie County, and the unemployment rate has dropped from 8.9% to 6.4%. But 14% of our population still lives in poverty, and we cannot leave those people behind. And if we're ever going to go after and address this issue on poverty, we need to do it when times are headed upward, not when they're headed downward, so that we bring everybody along in that boat, not just leaving some people behind.
Isn't that more of a state or even a federal issue? I mean, what is it that you can do as a local official to address something as endemic as poverty?
Well, what most people seem to forget is that while the vast funds come from the federal and state government, it's county governments that deliver the services that relate to health and human services and social services. Erie County has a $1.4 billion budget, and 90% of that is mandated primarily for these social and health services. So Erie County has the ability to be the person in the trenches, so to speak. Mm-hmm. It's not state officials, it's not federal officials, but it's county officials and county workers that are in the trenches trying to help these individuals. When they apply for Medicaid or SNAP or temporary assistance for needy families, they come to the county office building to do that. When we deal with child protective service issues, they come to county government for that. If they get in trouble with the law and they're on probation, they come to county government on that. And in all of these situations, we see a poverty component that needs to be addressed. So I think actually the best government to address these issues is county government. We've already implemented a number of strategies to do that, and we're going to be implementing more as time goes by.
So to that end, what is your position on the push by Bill de Blasio and others on the left to give the power to local officials like yourself to have a minimum wage that is regional or local, cities and counties having their own minimum wage?
Well, I think it certainly is something that we need to look at, and I'll give you a good example that I talked about yesterday in my State of the County address. Under current Medicaid guidelines, a single house, one individual in a household of four who's sort of bringing home the bacon, so to speak, mm-hmm. The head of the household, can make $15 an hour in Erie County and still qualify for Medicaid for him or herself and their family. That's nearly double the minimum wage across New York State, but they still qualify for Medicaid and they still qualify for assistance because they're just not making ends meet. So what might be an appropriate minimum wage in Schenectady is not going to be an appropriate minimum wage in Manhattan, and it's not going to be an appropriate minimum wage in Buffalo. You really need to look at it on a region by region basis, and that's what we're doing. And I think it's important because while Erie County is not unusually poor, our poverty rate is just about a little lower than the state and national averages. What we see is the poverty is all over the place. It's just not in the city of Buffalo. But the city of Buffalo certainly has its share of poverty because it's been listed as being the third poorest city in America. So this is an issue we need to address. It's just not Buffalo, it's in our towns, it's in our rural village centers, and if we let the time pass when our economy is going up and we forget these people, it's going to be very difficult to try to help them out later.
So, okay, a local minimum wage, of course, would require an act by Albany. The governor does not seem to be on board at this point. Also requiring action by Albany is your ongoing effort to reform child protective services. You would like to see CPS workers have access to medical and criminal records, for example. What else do you need to see from the Capitol, and do you believe that you have a good shot of getting it?
I believe we're going to have a good shot at getting it because, truthfully, this is an issue that's unfortunately dealing with a lot of communities right now. Since January of 2012, 6 children have been murdered in Erie County. And some of those individuals had families that were involved with CPS in the past, others did not. But all of these situations, we learned something from that. And we've learned how we can actually do a better job in CPS. And there's things that we've done locally to implement those changes, but there's only so much we can do because there's systemic issues that deal with state law. State law was basically created in the CPS area in the 1970s, and it really hasn't been reformed since then. So we have CPS workers who are trying to protect children whose hands are tied. The CPS workers, that is, their hands are tied because of the laws that were enacted in the 1970s. So we want to give caseworkers the ability to immediately access criminal and vital medical records. We want to give caseworkers the ability to actually listen to the tapes that come in from people who call into the CPS registry, because right now there are no tapes. If somebody makes a call alleging abuse against an individual, the information is written down, it's typed into a system, and it comes to Erie County. It's just like it comes to every other county, but we don't actually get a chance to hear the caller and find out more information, which you often can be missed by the people who receive it in the registry. There are certain acts that we think need to be described as a felony endangerment of a child. Unfortunately, right now, the most you can get out of that is a misdemeanor, and we believe there are situations that rise to a felony. And we certainly think there's many other things that need to be done which can help strengthen the system to give CPS workers the tools so they can do what they're supposed to do, protect children.
So this is an agenda you'll be advancing at the Capitol. There's also an agenda coming out of the Capitol. It's being set by the governor, by the legislature, and that includes an effort to reduce property taxes. The governor's very big on this. He just launched a new campaign about property tax relief. And one of his carrot and stick approaches is a consolidation by local governments will actually result in a property tax freeze and more relief for residents. So he's hoping that that puts the pressure on folks like yourself to act. My understanding is that you support the consolidation piece of the governor's proposal. It's actually in his $2 billion tax cut plan. That puts you at odds with a number of your local fellow local elected officials. Why is it that you have that position?
Well, when Governor Cuomo was Attorney General Cuomo and I was Comptroller Poloncarz, we worked together to address the myriad amounts of special taxing districts that exist in Erie County alone. There's approximately 10,500 special taxing districts across New York State. There's 1,044 of them in Erie County. That's 10% of the special taxing districts. We don't have 10% of the population. We don't have 10% of the tax base of Erie County. So why do we have 10% of the governments? Now, Erie County government's done a very good job of managing its tax rate. In fact, the tax rate for Erie County and the amount of money that's paid by the people of Erie County for an average home is less today than it was in 1990. Today, people pay for a $115,000 home, which is the average rate of home in Erie County, about $578 in taxes. In 1990, the average home was worth $60,000, and the homeowner paid $590 in taxes back then. So Erie County's done a very good job of managing its tax rate. It's all these little special taxing districts that have not. And the best way to lower that rate is to consolidate services, to consolidate these and eliminate these special taxing units so that we don't have so much tax base that we really can't afford going forward.
You know, you have a special relationship in Western New York with the governor, I think, in particular the city of Buffalo. He was just out there or announcing another project, an IBM technology center, if I'm not mistaken, information technology center for the city of Buffalo downtown. And you know, you have a number of other cities, including Syracuse, sort of jealous. And I wonder if you think that,
Correct.
And this is a hard question for you to answer, I think, but do you think that the governor is being fair in lavishing all this attention on the Western New York residents when other folks upstate are equally in need?
I think the governor's been quite fair, because I think people need to understand Buffalo, Erie County, and Western New York was forgotten. As the governor likes to say, Buffalo and Erie counties had a bad 50 years. And he's not kidding, we really have. And there has been a lot of attention lavished by the governor and the state on Buffalo and Erie County, but I think it's necessary. We lost so much of our population. A tremendous amount of population left. I mean, I'm of the age where many of the people that I graduated high school and college with don't live in Erie County anymore because they had to leave the community to find jobs. And they're not living in New York State. They're living in Tennessee, they're living in Texas, they're living in the Carolinas. So what the governor has done is basically made up for 50 years of neglect, is the best way to put it. And what we're seeing with the Buffalo Billion is a great thing. We're seeing an economic turnaround in Buffalo and Erie County. As I said, our unemployment rate has dropped substantially, and 12,300 jobs have been created in about 2 years. Most of the Buffalo Billion jobs haven't even been created yet. Those aren't going to happen for the next 2 to 3 years. So the rebound is important because the city of Buffalo, Erie County in Western New York, basically paid its dues where we got nothing for 50 years. And I think the governor has said enough's enough. We need to help them. They can't be just sitting out on an island. And if you ask the people here, they generally felt like for a long time they had more in common with people in Cleveland and Detroit than they did with New York City. I don't think that could be said anymore because people actually feel like they're a part of New York State where they didn't feel like it before.
Well, it's certainly good for you. I don't know if the folks in Rochester and Syracuse feel the same. We've been talking to them, and we will continue talking to everyone. I thank you very much, County Executive. It's always great to see you, and we will be talking to you again soon.
Sounds good. Thank you, Liz.